Alright folks, so this is the brand new Garmin Instinct Crossover, and this is probably by far the most interesting watch that Garmin's come out with since they launched the original Instinct over 4 years ago. Yes, 4 years ago. Anyways, the Instinct Crossover is largely based on the Instinct 2, where it has every feature that the Instinct 2 has, like all the sport profiles, all the new training and performance feedback that's new on the Instinct 2 series like VO2 Max, as well as even all the features that have come since the launch like HRV status. So basically from a software standpoint, these are identical. But I've actually discovered a lot of differences between these two, and I'm not just talking about the analog hands or the different GPS chipset. There's a lot more than that I'll be covering in this video, like the readability, if there's any difference in wearability, since the crossover is a little bit larger and a little bit heavier than the Instinct 2, the watch faces, which are much different, and some explanation on why this costs $100 to $150 more than the Instinct 2, depending on the model, and in essence, why you could possibly think of this as an Instinct Premium. Now, this video is more about all the differences between the Instinct Crossover and the Instinct 2, but I'll also have a follow-up, full in-depth review of the crossover that'll come out a little bit after this video, so make sure to subscribe and turn on that notification bell on to get a little bit of a when that video comes out. So first up, we have the actual design, and when looking at these side by side, that new design gives this Instinct a drastically different look to it. In my mind, it kind of elevates it, kind of somewhere in between a regular Instinct and a Phoenix in terms of looks. Another thing that makes this feel different and possibly a little bit more premium depending on how you look at it is that it's slightly heavier at 65 grams versus 53 grams, and I immediately noticed that when I took it out of the box. It's not like a massive difference in terms of wearability or anything like that, but that extra dozen grams makes it just feel a little bit more robust. A portion of that extra weight may have to do with the fact that there's a little bit of stainless steel in the bezel now, and again, I think that's something that adds a touch more classy look to it. For the most part, the dimensions are nearly identical, but the Instinct Crossover is about 1.7 millimeters thicker than the Instinct 2, and a portion of that is that extra stainless steel material that they added. The extra height, though, doesn't seem to make that much of a difference, though, in terms of wearability. Oh, and really quick, if you're finding the information in this video to be useful, do me a favor and just quickly hit that like button down below. It's a small little thing that you can do that'll help this video and the channel quite a bit, and I appreciate it. The analog watch hands are, of course, one of the biggest standout differences between the Instinct Crossover and the Instinct 2, where they give the Instinct Crossover a little bit more of a traditional watch look. What makes this unique, of course, is that they combine those watch hands with the LCD display below it. And of course, you don't want those watch hands being in the way of viewing the display, so they've come up with a nifty way that these hands move away if you're interacting with a watch. So like now, it's just in normal timekeeping mode, but as soon as I start interacting with it, the hands move away. Like if I go to the widgets, they all just go to a horizontal position. And they've even utilized the watch hands to act as a gauge on certain widgets, like the steps widget that shows where you're at with your step goal for the day. And this even works during workouts with the heart rate gauge. And then if we check out the weather widget, this is where it actually changes within the widget, where it first has the hands horizontal on the first page, and then if I scroll down, it moves to a vertical position based on that screen. Oh, and this even works with text messages, by the way, where the hands move away. So definitely lots of thought has gone into this hybrid approach, so kudos to all the people who are involved with that. And with both the watch hands as well as the numbers around the bezel, these are coated in a super luminova material, which makes them luminescent and glow in the dark. Now, the watch hands may be the biggest standout in terms of design with the Instinct Crossover, but there's actually a lot more differences, including the new dual layer bezel, which creates this fantastic looking separation between the LCD display below it and the top of the glass. But in doing so, they've also gotten rid of the pretty big difference with the outside of the bezel to the top of the glass on the Instinct 2, where the lens on the Crossover is just barely beneath the topmost portion of the bezel, but certainly still enough to protect it a little bit, but maybe not as much as the Instinct 2. However, I am just talking about the distance from the top of the bezel to the top of the lens. The distance from the top of the bezel to the actual display beneath it, though, looks to be about the same. And that separation looks great from the point of view of the dual layer bezel, where there's this kind of layered effect, but I'd also argue that it makes it slightly less readable than the Instinct 2, since with the Instinct 2, there's essentially very little to no gap from the top of the lens to the actual display. So for example, I've chosen somewhat similar watch faces here just for demonstration. And by the way, the watch faces are actually much different between these two, which I'll cover a little bit later in the video. But basically, because of that greater distance from the display to the lens, it's just slightly less visible at a glance. And if we tilt it at an angle, we can see that difference even more. And then here's also what it looks like with the backlight on, but here's where you also may notice some polarization with the Instinct 2 when the watch face is angled about maybe 60 to 70 degrees from your eyes. Now, although there is a bit of difference in terms of the readability of the display, the crossover is still fine, by the way. It's just that the Instinct 2 is a little bit better. But a counter argument to all that, though, is that, well, you will still certainly be able to see the time at a glance easier in the Instinct Crossover, since it has those analog hands that have the luminescent coating on them. And another difference, too, with the display is that they've removed the cutout window, which was certainly a very unique part of the Instinct design. I mean, it almost could be argued that there was something that made an Instinct an Instinct. Now, with both the Instinct 2 as well as the Instinct Crossover, both of these have a solar option, and that's what I have for you here today. But you'll also notice that the look is actually much different, where with the Instinct 2, you really notice the solar panel, where on the Instinct Crossover, that dual layer bezel helps hide that panel a lot. The day-to-day battery life has remained the same though without solar charging with up to 28 days, but there are some differences with the GPS battery life, and a lot of this does have to do with the fact that they switched GPS chipsets with the Crossover, where this has the multi-GNSS chipset, which can access like 5 different satellite systems, and with the Instinct 2 that had the older chipset that can access 2 satellite systems. And I think that's the reason why we're seeing slightly less battery life with the highest accuracy settings on both these devices, because the Crossover is simply accessing more satellite systems, but it does have much better battery life with the battery saver modes where GPS accuracy settings are reduced. Either way, still great battery life out of either of these. And then another difference is that with all the Instinct Crossovers, they all have Garmin Pay, where Garmin Pay is only available on the Instinct 2 Solar, the Diesel Edition Instinct 2, as well as some of their specialty editions. And then for the difference in watch faces, there's actually a very different selection between the Crossover and the Instinct 2, and probably rightfully so, considering the watch faces on the Instinct 2 have to accommodate for the cutout window, and with the Crossover, they don't have to take that into consideration. However, they do have to think about how the analog hands would work in conjunction with the watch faces. Now, I did have a question pop up in my Crossover intro video that I wanted to answer, and I was very curious about this as well, and that's if the watch hands still work if you power off the watch, and unfortunately, it doesn't appear so. However, the watch hands will still work if you have it in battery saver mode. So when I first saw the images of the Instinct Crossover, I gotta be honest with you, it didn't necessarily win my heart over, but the more and more I looked at it, as well as seeing it in person, I've done a complete 180, and I think this looks amazing. This is very much like an Instinct Premium in my mind. But the price also does reflect that, so is it worth it? Well, I'd actually love to hear about what you think, so definitely let us all know your thoughts about the Instinct Crossover in the comments section down below. And on your way down there, if you found the information in this video to be useful, do me a favor and just quickly hit that like button, and also subscribe to the channel for my full in-depth review of the Instinct Crossover that'll be coming out soon. In the meantime, thanks so much for watching, and we will see you in the next video.